Sir, what are you doing here?
Waiting for my friend to go work out. Why?
We got a report about someone trying to force entry. Let me see your ID.
ID? For what?
You matched the call. That's enough for me.
Is it because I'm black?
Exactly. You got it right, buddy.
This is a big mistake, and it will cost a lot.
She's been calling me non-stop on the way here. Do you even understand what you just did? The man in that car, that's the police chief's brother. Get him out of cuffs right freaking now!
Officer Ryan Kelton had been on the force for only 7 months. 7 months of half-learned policies, shaky judgment, and a training file filled with notes no department ever wants to admit they ignored. Impulsive under pressure, relies on instinct instead of procedure, prone to escalations. But Brookford police needed bodies on the street, not perfect cadets, so Kelton passed, barely. On June 4, 2024, his inexperience and assumptions collided with a man standing outside a gym on a sunny afternoon. A man simply waiting for a friend. A man doing absolutely nothing suspicious. Kelton approached with his hand hovering near his taser, then jumped straight to accusations, then to cuffs, and then to panic because he had no idea who he just arrested. Not until the supervisor arrived did the truth detonate the situation. The man in the back of that patrol car was the police chief's brother, and Kelton had just destroyed his entire career. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. Stories like these deserve to be seen, and your support helps bring the truth to light.
Brookford, a suburban city of roughly 120,000 people in the upper Midwest. The kind of place where strip malls line the main roads, where chain gyms compete for memberships, where residential neighborhoods spread out in planned developments. Peak Fitness sat at the corner of Riverside Avenue and Oak Street, a mid-tier gym with floor-to-ceiling windows, bright signage, and a parking lot that stayed busy from early morning until late evening. It was 4:23 p.m. on a Tuesday, the tail end of the lunch rush workout crowd and the beginning of the after-work surge. The weather was perfect, 73 degrees, clear skies, gentle breeze. People moved in and out of the gym in workout clothes, carrying water bottles and gym bags, following their routines without incident. Marcus Whitfield, 38 years old, stood near the entrance, waiting for his friend David to arrive. They had a standing Tuesday workout appointment, had been training together for over a year. David was running 15 minutes late, stuck in traffic, texting Marcus updates every few minutes. Marcus wore athletic shorts, a gray t-shirt, and sneakers. His gym bag sat at his feet, containing his workout gear, a change of clothes, his water bottle, and his phone charger. He wasn't pacing, wasn't looking in windows, wasn't trying doors, just standing, occasionally checking his phone, waiting. Marcus Whitfield was the younger brother of Police Chief Anthony Whitfield, who'd run the Brookford Police Department for the past 6 years. Marcus worked as a financial analyst for a consulting firm downtown, lived in the house 3 miles from the gym, and had been a member of Peak Fitness for 18 months. His membership card was in his wallet. His photo was in the gym system. He had every right to be exactly where he was. But to Officer Ryan Kelton, who pulled into the parking lot on routine patrol, Marcus looked suspicious. Kelton was 24 years old, 7 months removed from the academy, and operating with the dangerous combination of impulsive decision-making under pressure, tends to escalate situations that could be resolved through communication, and a strong reliance on gut instinct rather than established procedure. But Brookford PD was understaffed. 3 senior officers had retired in the past year, 2 had transferred to better-paying departments. The city council had approved new hiring, but the academy pipeline was slow. So, supervisors were clearing rookies for solo patrol faster than policy technically required, hoping experience would compensate for inadequate training. Kelton had been cleared after just 10 weeks of field training, 2 weeks short of the department standard. His supervising officer had signed off with reservations, but under pressure from command staff who needed patrol cars on the street. Kelton's Axon Bodycam activated as he exited his patrol car. The footage would later show exactly what happened, frame by frame, a complete record of how assumptions become violations. He walked across the parking lot toward Marcus with purpose, his hand already hovering near his taser holster, his posture communicating suspicion before a single word was spoken. "Sir, what are you doing here?"
Marcus turned, his expression shifting from neutral to confused. The question seemed absurd given the context, standing outside a gym at 4:23 p.m., waiting for my friend to go work out. Why? Kelton's eyes scanned Marcus from head to toe, lingering on details that meant nothing. The gym bag, the athletic clothing, the fact that he was black. "We got a report about someone trying to force entry. Let me see your ID." Marcus's confusion deepened into frustration. "ID? For what? I'm a member here. I'm waiting for my workout partner." "You matched the call. That's enough for me." This was Kelton's first major error, though far from his last. There had been no call about forced entry. No dispatch report, no description of a suspect. Kelton had simply driven past, seen a black man standing near a building, and his inadequately trained instincts had told him that warranted investigation. When Marcus questioned him, he had fabricated a justification rather than admit he had no legitimate reason for the stop. "I don't match anything," Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. "I'm standing outside a gym I belong to, waiting for a friend. That's not a crime." Kelton stepped closer, his hand moving from hovering near his taser to actually touching the handle. "Sir, I'm going to need you to comply. Put your hands behind your back." "For what? I haven't done anything!" Before Marcus could say another word, Kelton grabbed his wrist and forced his hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked into place with unnecessary force. Marcus's jaw tightened, his breathing quickened, but he didn't resist physically. He knew how these situations could escalate. He knew the statistics on use of force. He stayed still but spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "This is a big mistake, and it will cost a lot." Gym members were starting to notice. Several stopped mid-conversation, watching the encounter unfold. Phones came out, cameras activating. A woman in workout clothes called out, "What did he do? He was just standing there." Kelton ignored her, focused entirely on securing Marcus and getting him into the patrol car. He searched Marcus's gym bag, pulling out the water bottle, the workout clothes, the phone charger. Nothing suspicious, nothing illegal, nothing that could possibly justify the detention. But Kelton had committed to the stop and couldn't back down without admitting error. "You were attempting to gain unlawful entry," Kelton said, his voice carrying the defensive edge of someone who knows he's wrong but won't acknowledge it. "I said I'm waiting for someone. That's it. I'm a member here. My name is in your system. Call the gym manager. Check your dispatch records. Do anything except what you're doing right now." Kelton guided Marcus toward the patrol car. The Bodycam captured everything. Marcus's calm attempts at explaining, Kelton's refusal to listen, the growing crowd of witnesses, the phones recording from multiple angles. And it captured Marcus's final statement before being placed in the back seat. "You have no idea what you just did." What would you have done if an officer detained you for simply waiting outside a building?
Sergeant Linda Morrison received the call 7 minutes after Kelton had initiated the stop. She was 3 blocks away, finishing paperwork from a traffic accident, when a radio crackled with Kelton's voice. "Show me one in custody at Peak Fitness, Riverside, and Oak." Morrison knew Kelton. She'd reviewed his training file when he was cleared for solo patrol and had disagreed with the decision. Too impulsive, too quick to escalate, not ready for independent decision-making. But she'd been overruled by command staff, who needed coverage more than caution. She also knew something Kelton apparently didn't. The police chief's brother was a member at Peak Fitness and worked out there regularly. And when her phone started ringing, first the desk sergeant, then the captain, then the police chief himself, she knew exactly what had happened before she arrived. She pulled into the parking lot at 4:31 p.m., 8 minutes after the initial contact. Her body cam captured the scene. Kelton standing beside his patrol car, Marcus sitting in the back seat, visible through the window, at least a dozen gym members watching and recording. Morrison approached quickly, her expression already shifting from neutral to concerned. "Kelton, why is this man in cuffs?" "Got a report about attempted forced entry. Subject matched the description. He was acting suspicious, refused to cooperate." "What report?" Morrison interrupted. "I've been monitoring dispatch. There's been no call about forced entry at this location." Kelton's confidence faltered. When I arrived, he was standing outside looking around. Seemed suspicious. I made contact to investigate. Morrison closed her eyes briefly, the weight of the situation settling over her. Her phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen. Chief Whitfield. She answered with a single word. Understood. She turned to Kelton, her voice dropping to barely controlled fury. Chief's been calling me non-stop on the way here. She paused, letting the implication hang. Do you even understand what you just did? Kelton's face showed confusion. I detained a suspicious individual. The man in that car is Police Chief Whitfield's brother. The color drained from Kelton's face. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Morrison watched him process the information, watched the realization hit, watched his entire posture collapse. Get him out of those cuffs, right now. Kelton fumbled with his keys, hand shaking. He opened the back door of the patrol car. Marcus stepped out slowly, deliberately, rubbing his wrists where the metal had pressed against skin. Morrison approached immediately. Mr. Whitfield, I am so sorry. This should never have happened. Marcus looked at Kelton, then at Morrison. His voice was calm, but carried unmistakable anger. I told him I was waiting for my friend. I told him I was a member here. I offered to provide proof. He didn't care. He fabricated a call about forced entry and arrested me for standing outside a gym. Morrison had no defense because there was no defense. Sir, we'll be conducting a full investigation. That was profiling, Sergeant. Plain and simple. Your officer saw a black man standing near a building and decided that was criminal behavior. It doesn't matter who my brother is. It matters that this happens, that it happened to me, that it would have happened regardless. By this point, at least 15 people were recording. Morrison could see the phones, could imagine the social media posts already spreading, could calculate the public relations catastrophe unfolding in real time. This wasn't just an unlawful detention. This was the police chief's brother, detained by one of the chief's own officers for doing nothing wrong in front of dozens of witnesses, with video evidence. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his brother. Anthony, I was just arrested outside my gym by one of your officers for waiting. Yes, actually arrested, in handcuffs. I'm fine, but we need to talk.
Do you think the officer would have acted differently if he knew the man's identity? Or was this bound to happen anyway? Internal Affairs Investigation. By Wednesday morning, the incident had reached Captain James Rodriguez, head of Internal Affairs. The Bodycam footage was already on his desk, along with civilian video from 3 different angles, a formal complaint from Marcus Whitfield, and a media inquiry list that ran 2 pages long. Rodriguez had been with Brookford PD for 19 years. He'd investigated hundreds of misconduct cases, but this one carried unique complications. The victim was the chief's brother, the footage was already circulating on social media, and the violations were so clear that defending them would be impossible. He started with the dispatch records. As Marcus had stated, there had been no call about forced entry at Peak Fitness, no report of suspicious activity, no description of a suspect. Kelton had fabricated the entire justification for the stop. Rodriguez pulled the gym's security footage. It showed Marcus arriving at 4:19 p.m., standing near the entrance, checking his phone periodically, making no attempt to enter the building, exhibiting no behavior that could reasonably be considered suspicious. At 4:23 p.m., Kelton appeared on camera, approaching Marcus directly. The entire encounter, from first contact to handcuffs, took less than 4 minutes. Then Rodriguez pulled Kelton's training file. The warnings were extensive and damning. Officer Kelton demonstrates impulsive decision-making, particularly in situations involving perceived non-compliance. Recommend additional scenario-based training on de-escalation. Noted pattern of escalating routine encounters into confrontations. Needs coaching on when not to initiate contact. Concerns about Officer Kelton's ability to distinguish between unusual behavior and criminal activity. Frequently interprets neutral actions as suspicious. Field training evaluation. Officer Kelton shows enthusiasm but lacks judgment necessary for solo patrol. Recommend minimum 4 additional weeks of supervised field work before clearance. The final recommendation had been overwritten by a command staff memo. Due to operational necessity and current staffing levels, Officer Kelton is cleared for solo patrol effective immediately. Supervisors should monitor his performance closely during initial months. That close monitoring had never happened. Kelton had been patrolling alone for 7 months, making decisions without oversight, operating on instinct and bias rather than training and procedure. Rodriguez conducted the formal interview with Kelton on Wednesday afternoon. The conversation was recorded per department policy, every word documented for the investigations that would follow: internal, civilian oversight, and likely federal. Officer Kelton, you stated in your report that you responded to a call about forced entry at Peak Fitness. Dispatch records show no such call. Explain the discrepancy. Kelton shifted in his chair, his attorney beside him taking notes. I may have been mistaken about the specific call. When I arrived, the subject's behavior seemed suspicious. What specific behavior? Rodriguez interrupted. The security footage shows Marcus standing still, checking his phone periodically. What about that behavior suggested criminal activity? He was loitering. Waiting for a friend to arrive is not loitering. It's not suspicious. It's not illegal. You had no reasonable suspicion to initiate contact, yet you stopped him, demanded ID, fabricated a justification, and arrested him. Walk me through your actual decision-making process. Silence. Kelton's attorney advised him not to answer. Rodriguez leaned forward. Let me tell you what the evidence shows. You saw a black man standing outside a building without any articulatable reasonable suspicion, without any reported criminal activity, without any legitimate law enforcement purpose. You decided he needed to be questioned. When he exercised his right to ask why, you became defensive. When he didn't immediately comply with your unlawful demand, you arrested him. That's not policing. That's racial profiling. The interview continued for another 40 minutes. Kelton had no credible explanations. His attorney tried to argue that his training was inadequate, that the department should share responsibility for clearing him before he was ready. The argument wasn't wrong, but it didn't absolve Kelton of personal responsibility for his actions. Rodriguez's preliminary report recommended immediate termination and forwarded the case to the city attorney for evaluation of civil liability.
The video footage exploded across social media Tuesday evening. By Wednesday morning, it had been viewed over 5 million times across various platforms. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of Marcus and critical of Kelton. He was literally just standing there, nothing suspicious at all. If this can happen to the police chief's brother, imagine what happened to everyone else. Officer needs to be fired and charged. This is exactly what we mean by racial profiling. Local news stations picked up the story by noon. Every broadcast led with the same angle. Police chief's brother arrested by department officer. The optics were devastating. If the chief's own brother could be profiled and unlawfully detained, it exposed how pervasive the problem was. Police Chief Anthony Whitfield held a press conference Wednesday afternoon. He stood at a podium in full uniform, his expression grave, flanked by the city manager and the president of the Civilian Police Oversight Board. Yesterday afternoon, my brother Marcus was unlawfully detained by one of our officers. I want to be absolutely clear. Family relationship does not make this worse or better. The violation is the same whether the victim is my brother or any other citizen. What happened to Marcus happens to black men every day in this country. The difference is that my position gives this incident visibility and demands accountability. He paused, his voice taking on weight. I have recused myself from the internal investigation to avoid any appearance of bias. But I will not be silent about what this represents. Officer Kelton stopped my brother without cause, fabricated a justification, and arrested him for existing while black. That is unacceptable, and it reveals systemic failures in our training and supervision that I am committed to addressing. The statement was carefully worded, threading the difficult line between family loyalty and professional responsibility. But it was also genuine. Chief Whitfield had spent his career trying to reform police culture, implementing bias training and accountability measures. His own brother's arrest made the stakes personal. Marcus gave his own statement that evening, standing outside the gym where he'd been arrested less than 24 hours earlier. I wasn't targeted because I'm the police chief's brother. I was targeted because of how I look. My brother didn't protect me from this. His position just made it visible. But for every person who sees this video and is outraged, remember that this happens every day to people who don't have cameras, don't have platforms, don't have family members in positions of authority. That's why accountability matters, not just for me, but for everyone.
Marcus Whitfield retained Jennifer Chen from the Northern Civil Rights Legal Foundation. Chen had built her career on police misconduct cases and saw immediately that this one was both personally compelling and legally airtight. The federal lawsuit, filed in U.S. District Court 3 weeks after the incident, was comprehensive and devastating. The complaint ran 63 pages and detailed not just Kelton's actions, but the systemic failures that enabled them. Count 1, Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful stop and detention. Officer Kelton initiated contact without reasonable suspicion, detained Marcus without legal justification, and arrested him without probable cause. Count 2, Fourth Amendment violation, false arrest. Marcus was unlawfully restrained and placed in custody despite engaging in entirely lawful conduct. Count 3, 14th Amendment violation, racial profiling. The stop was motivated by racial bias, as evidenced by the lack of any legitimate law enforcement purpose and the fabricated justification. Count 4, fabrication of evidence. Kelton's claim about a forced entry call constituted fabrication of evidence to justify an unlawful stop. Count 5, emotional distress. The humiliation of being handcuffed in public, treated as a criminal, and subjected to racial profiling caused significant emotional harm. Count 6, municipal liability. The city of Brookford failed to adequately train its officers, ignored documented concerns about Kelton's judgment, cleared him for solo patrol despite recommendations for extended training, and failed to provide adequate supervision. The lawsuit sought $10 million in damages plus comprehensive policy reforms. The city's legal team reviewed the evidence and quickly realized they had no viable defense. The Bodycam footage was indefensible. The security camera video corroborated Marcus's account completely. Kelton's fabrication about the forced entry call was documented. His training file proved the department had ignored clear warning signs. Settlement negotiations began within 6 weeks. The city wanted to resolve the case quickly before discovery revealed additional problematic patterns in the department's training and hiring practices. Marcus's attorneys had leverage. The video had been viewed millions of times, public support was overwhelming, and a jury verdict could easily exceed what the city was willing to pay in settlement. 8 months after the gym parking lot arrest, the settlement was finalized. The terms were made public per Marcus's insistence that transparency was essential to accountability. $8.5 million total settlement, $6 million compensatory damages to Marcus Whitfield, $2.5 million punitive damages, one of the largest settlements in department history. Officer Ryan Kelton terminated. Immediate termination for gross misconduct, fabrication of evidence, and civil rights violations. Post-certification permanently revoked by State Board. Name entered into National Decertification Index. Barred from any future law enforcement employment. No union defense. The police union declined to defend Kelton, citing clear and documented procedural violations that make defense untenable. Comprehensive policy reforms. All rookies required to complete minimum 16 weeks of field training with no exceptions for staffing needs. Supervisor approval required for any detention initiated by officers with less than 2 years' experience. Mandatory bias recognition training every 90 days for all officers. Early warning system implemented to track patterns of stops, particularly racial disparities. Civilian Oversight Board granted expanded authority to review Bodycam footage and recommend discipline. Review of all detentions and arrests made by Officer Kelton during his 7 months of solo patrol. 14 cases identified for re-examination. Public acknowledgement. The city issued a formal apology acknowledging that Marcus Whitfield was unlawfully detained and that Officer Kelton's conduct violated constitutional rights and department policy.
Do you think financial settlements actually fix anything? Or does deeper reform need to happen?
Officer Ryan Kelton left law enforcement at age 25. His career, barely 7 months old, ended with a termination for cause that would follow him permanently. The decertification meant he couldn't be hired by another police department anywhere in the country. The National Decertification Index entry meant that any employer running a background check would immediately see that he'd been fired for civil rights violations. He found work briefly in private security, but was terminated within 3 months when clients discovered his history. The video of him arresting Marcus Whitfield, viewed millions of times, made him permanently unemployable in any field involving public trust or authority. He issued no public statement beyond a brief apology through his attorney. I made serious errors in judgment that I deeply regret. I accept responsibility for my actions. Marcus Whitfield used a portion of the settlement to establish a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in civil rights law and criminal justice reform. He also became an advocate, speaking at police training sessions across the state, sharing his experience with rooms full of new officers. When Officer Kelton stopped me, I was doing nothing wrong, nothing suspicious, nothing illegal. I was waiting for a friend outside a gym I'd been a member of for over a year, but he looked at me and saw a threat. That's what unchecked bias does. It turns innocent people into suspects, turns routine moments into confrontations, turns your careers into cautionary tales. The Brookford Police Department implemented all mandated reforms. The extended field training reduced misconduct complaints by 47% in the first year. The supervisor approval requirement for rookie-initiated detentions prevented several potentially problematic stops. The bias training, combined with regular testing and scenario-based evaluation, helped officers recognize and challenge their assumptions. Chief Whitfield used the incident as a catalyst for broader reforms. He partnered with community organizations, established regular public forums for accountability discussions, and made Bodycam footage more accessible through a public portal. The department became a model studied by other agencies trying to implement meaningful change. But the most profound impact was personal. Marcus Whitfield continued his workouts at peak fitness, refused to be driven away from his routine by one officer's prejudice. But he was changed. He noticed patrol cars differently now, felt tension when officers were nearby, carried the memory of being handcuffed for existing in public space. 2 years after the incident, he reflected in an interview. The settlement was about accountability. The reforms were about preventing it from happening again, but neither can restore what was taken, the fundamental sense of safety that comes from knowing you can exist in public spaces without being criminalized. My brother runs the police department. I won $8.5 million, and I still feel vulnerable when I see a police car. That's the real cost, not the money the city paid, but the trust that was broken and can't be fully repaired. The Bodycam footage from that June afternoon remains a training tool, shown to new officers as an example of how assumptions destroy careers and violate rights. Ryan Kelton's 7-month law enforcement career serves as a warning about what happens when departments prioritize staffing over training, when warning signs are ignored, when bias is allowed to operate as instinct. And Marcus Whitfield's experience serves as a reminder that no credentials, no family connections, no amount of legitimacy can fully protect black men from being presumed criminal. That accountability and reform, while necessary, can't erase the daily reality of moving through a world where your presence is seen as suspicious, where waiting for a friend requires being prepared to prove you belong. If you believe these stories matter, if you think officers who profile should lose their badges permanently, hit that subscribe button. We're exposing how inadequate training and unchecked bias create constitutional violations. We're demanding accountability for officers who target people based on appearance. We're fighting for a system where waiting outside a gym doesn't require defending your right to exist. This isn't about one rookie or one victim. It's about every person who's been stopped without cause and forced to prove they're not a threat.
Sir, stop right there for me.
What's going on, officer?
We got a call about suspicious behavior.
Suspicious? So why me?
You fit the description we were given. Until we sort it out, you have the right to remain silent.
I'm not resisting, but you're making a mistake.
State chief's been calling me non-stop on the way over. Do you even know what y'all did? That man in the car? That's State Senator Malik J. Thomas. Get him out of cuffs. Now!
Officer Darren McCall had been with the Brookline City Police Department for just under a year.
12 months of half-completed training modules, 3 documented concerns about impulse control, and a reputation for stopping anyone who didn't fit his idea of belonging. His supervisors called him motivated, his fellow rookies called him reckless, but the department, short-staffed and overwhelmed, just called him available. On May 9th, 2024, that availability collided with a man walking toward a grocery store on a sunny afternoon. A man who wasn't acting suspicious, wasn't breaking any laws, wasn't even speaking, just existing in the wrong place in the wrong officer's imagination. A stop based on nothing more than bias turned into a detention, then an arrest, then a full-blown scandal the department desperately tried to contain. What McCall didn't know, not until it was far too late, was who that man actually was. A sitting state senator. And this one mistake would end his career and cost the city $3.5 million. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Brookline City, a mid-size urban center in the Midwest with tree-lined streets, well-maintained public spaces, and a growing professional class. The Riverside shopping classes sat on the west side, a busy commercial hub with a grocery store, pharmacy, coffee shop, and ample parking. Thursday afternoon traffic was steady. Cars pulling in and out, shopping carts rattling across the pavement, people moving through their weekly routines without incident. At 2:47 p.m., Malik Thomas, 39 years old, pulled into the parking lot driving his modest sedan. He was dressed casually, dark jeans, a gray Henley shirt, sneakers. He just finished a constituent meeting and needed to pick up groceries before heading home. He parked in the third row, grabbed his reusable shopping bags from the back seat, and started walking toward the store entrance. Malik Thomas was a state senator, elected 3 years earlier representing District 14, which included parts of Brookline City and 2 surrounding suburbs. He'd built his career on education reform and criminal justice oversight. He served on the Senate Judiciary Committee. His face had been in local newspapers, on campaign mailers, at community town halls. He was a public figure in his district, though not universally recognizable across the state. Officer Darren McCall was parked at the edge of the lot, ostensibly monitoring traffic, but mostly scrolling through his patrol computer. At 26 years old, with 12 months on the force, McCall operated with a mindset shaped more by assumptions than experience. He'd been cleared for solo patrol after minimal field training, despite documented concerns about his judgment, his tendency to escalate, his pattern of stops that seemed to target black men disproportionately. McCall looked up from his computer and saw Malik Thomas walking across the parking lot. Nothing about Thomas's behavior suggested criminal activity. He wasn't running, wasn't looking around nervously, wasn't approaching cars or acting strangely, just walking toward a grocery store with shopping bags in hand. But McCall's pattern recognition system, built on unchecked bias rather than evidence-based policing, flagged Thomas as worth investigating. McCall exited his patrol car, his Axon Bodycam activating automatically. He walked quickly across the parking lot, closing the distance between them. "Sir, stop right there for me." Thomas turned, confusion crossing his face. "What's going on, officer?" "We got a call about suspicious behavior in this area." This was a lie. No call had come through dispatch, no report of criminal activity. McCall had simply decided that Thomas's presence warranted investigation. Thomas's expression shifted from confusion to frustration. Suspicious? So why me? McCall stepped closer, his eyes scanning Thomas from head to toe, looking for justification that didn't exist. "We fit the description we were given. Until we sort it out, you have the right to remain silent." The absurdity of the statement hung in the air. What description? Of what crime? Thomas shook his head, not aggressively, but with clear incredulity. "Look, whatever you think I'm doing, you're wrong. Sir, you're being detained."
Thomas felt the familiar weight of being black in America, of having to prove innocence for the crime of existing. But he also knew his rights, knew police procedure, knew exactly what was happening. "I'm not resisting, but you're making a mistake." McCall reached for his handcuffs. Other shoppers were starting to notice, slowing down, watching the encounter unfold. A woman pulled out her phone and began recording. McCall either didn't notice or didn't care. He grabbed Thomas's wrist and forced his hands behind his back, the handcuffs clicking into place with unnecessary force. Thomas's voice remained calm but carried an edge of warning. "This is a mistake. You need to check who I am before this goes further."
6 minutes after the initial stop, a second patrol car pulled into the parking lot fast, tires squealing slightly. Sergeant Rita Hernandez emerged, moving quickly toward McCall's vehicle where Thomas sat handcuffed in the back seat. Her phone had been ringing non-stop for the past 4 minutes. The police chief, the department's public information officer, someone from the city manager's office, all asking the same question. Why was one of their officers arresting State Senator Malik Thomas in a grocery store parking lot? Hernandez approached McCall with barely controlled fury. "Chief's been calling me non-stop on the way over." McCall's confidence faltered slightly. Suspicious male matched the description from, "Do you even know what you did?" Hernandez's voice cut through his excuse. "That man in your car, that's State Senator Malik J. Thomas." The color drained from McCall's face. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "What?" "Get him out of those cuffs, now!" McCall fumbled with his keys, hands shaking as he opened the patrol car door. Thomas stepped out, rubbing his wrists where the metal had pressed against skin. Hernandez approached immediately, her voice a mixture of professionalism and genuine regret. "Senator Thomas, I deeply apologize. This should not have happened." Thomas looked at McCall, then at Hernandez. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of controlled anger. "I told him, several times. He didn't listen. Sir, we'll be conducting a full investigation. This wasn't confusion, Sergeant. This was profiling. I was walking to a grocery store. That's what I was doing, and your officer decided that was suspicious enough to detain and handcuff me in front of dozens of witnesses." Hernandez had no defense, because there was no defense. She could see the phones recording, could imagine the social media posts already going live, could calculate the public relations disaster unfolding in real time. Thomas pulled out his phone and made a call. "David, I need you to meet me at home. I was just arrested in a grocery store parking lot by Brookline PD. Yes, arrested. For walking while black, apparently." The woman who'd been recording the entire encounter approached. "Senator Thomas, I got everything on video. I'm posting it now. People need to see this." Thomas nodded. "Thank you. Make sure it's clear I wasn't doing anything wrong. Just walking. That's all it takes, apparently. What would you have done if you were in this man's position and knew the officer had zero real reason to stop you?"
By 5 p.m., less than 90 minutes after the incident, the video had exploded across social media. The woman's TikTok post had 3 million views. Twitter was trending hashtag BrooklinePD and hashtag Senator Thomas. News outlets were calling the police department for comment. The footage was crystal clear. A man walking peacefully across a parking lot, an officer approaching without cause, the detention, the handcuffs, the supervising sergeant's panicked arrival. Comments flooded in. He was literally just walking, nothing suspicious at all. If they'll do this to a state senator, imagine what they do to regular people. Officer needs to be fired immediately. How many other people has this cop profiled? The Brookline Police Department's public information officer released a brief statement. "We are aware of an incident involving one of our officers and State Senator Thomas. The matter is under investigation. We take all complaints seriously." The statement satisfied no one. Local civil rights organizations issued immediate responses demanding transparency, accountability, and Officer McCall's termination. The state NAACP chapter called for a federal investigation into the department's practices. Other state legislators, both Democrat and Republican, issued statements supporting Senator Thomas. By that evening, Senator Thomas held a brief press availability outside his home. Cameras from 5 local news stations captured his statement. "This afternoon, I was walking toward a grocery store to buy food for my family. I was detained, handcuffed, and placed in a patrol car by Officer Darren McCall of the Brookline Police Department. When I asked what I'd done, he said I matched a description of suspicious activity. There was no description. There was no suspicious activity. There was just a black man in a parking lot, and apparently that was enough. He paused, his voice steady but heavy. I wasn't targeted because I'm a senator. I was targeted because I'm a black man. That's what makes this matter. Not my position, but the pattern. Officer McCall didn't know who I was when he stopped me. He just knew what I looked like, and that was sufficient grounds for detention in his mind. Do you think the officer would have acted differently if he knew who the man was, or was this always going to happen?
By Friday morning, Captain James Rodriguez of Internal Affairs had assembled a complete file on Officer Darren McCall. The Bodycam footage was damning enough on its own, but the pattern that emerged from deeper investigation was even worse. Rodriguez pulled McCall's stop records from his 12 months on the force. The data was stark. 47 total stops for suspicious behavior. 38 of those stops involved black individuals, 81%. Brookline's population was 23% black. 0 arrests resulted from any of these stops. Multiple complaints filed by citizens who felt racially profiled. Not a single stop had resulted in discovery of criminal activity. Rodriguez cross-referenced the stops with dispatch records. In 31 cases, there had been no dispatch call justifying the stop. McCall had initiated contact based solely on his own observations. The pattern was unmistakable. He was targeting black residents without cause, fishing for criminal activity that didn't exist, creating confrontations that served no legitimate law enforcement purpose. The training records were equally troubling. McCall's academy file included multiple warnings. Officer McCall demonstrates difficulty distinguishing between unusual behavior and criminal behavior. Noted tendency to act on assumptions rather than observed facts. Concerns about implicit bias. Recommend additional training before field deployment. His field training reports showed similar patterns. McCall needs coaching on when not to initiate contact. Several instances of stops without articulable reasonable suspicion. Recommend extended field training period to address judgment concerns. But extended training hadn't happened. Additional bias recognition courses hadn't been completed. The documented concerns had been filed and forgotten because the department needed officers on the street, and McCall met the minimum qualifications on paper. Rodriguez interviewed the supervising sergeant who'd cleared McCall for solo patrol. The conversation was uncomfortable. Did you review the concerns in his training file before signing off? I skimmed them. Nothing seemed serious enough to delay him. Multiple warnings about bias and poor judgment didn't seem serious? We were short-staffed. He passed the basic requirements. I thought field experience would help him improve. Instead, he spent 12 months profiling residents, and now we have a state senator filing a federal civil rights lawsuit. The sergeant had no response. At what point should departments start removing officers who show obvious patterns, even without violent incidents?
Senator Thomas retained David Chen from the Midwest Civil Rights Legal Foundation. Chen filed a comprehensive federal lawsuit in U.S. District Court 8 days after the incident. The complaint was methodical and devastating. Count 1, Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful stop and detention. Officer McCall stopped Senator Thomas without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, detained him without legal justification, and arrested him without probable cause. Count 2, 14th Amendment violation, racial profiling. The stop was motivated by racial bias, as evidenced by Officer McCall's pattern of disproportionately stopping black individuals and his inability to articulate any legitimate law enforcement purpose. Count 3, false arrest. Senator Thomas was unlawfully restrained and placed in custody despite engaging in entirely lawful conduct. Count 4, emotional distress. The humiliation of being handcuffed in public, treated as a criminal while engaging in routine activity, and subjected to racial profiling caused significant emotional harm. Count 5, municipal liability. The city of Brookline failed to adequately train its officers.
ignored documented concerns about Officer McCall's judgment and bias, and maintained policies that enabled discriminatory policing. The lawsuit sought $3.5 million in damages, termination of Officer McCall, and comprehensive policy reforms. The city's legal team reviewed the evidence and quickly advised settlement. The body cam footage was indefensible. McCall's stop pattern proved systemic targeting. The training records showed the department had ignored clear warning signs. Fighting the case would only generate more negative publicity and potentially result in a larger verdict. The city manager reached out to Senator Thomas's attorney within 3 weeks. Settlement negotiations began immediately. 8 months after the parking lot incident, the settlement was finalized. The terms were made public per Senator Thomas's insistence. $3.5 million settlement paid directly to Senator Thomas, with a portion donated to civil rights organizations working on police reform. Officer Darren McCall terminated, effective immediately, with cause listed as gross misconduct, pattern of discriminatory stops, and civil rights violations. Post-certification review. McCall's law enforcement certification was revoked by the State Peace Officers Standards and Training Board. State Misconduct Registry. McCall's name, photograph, and termination details were entered into the state's public database of officers terminated for cause. Public acknowledgement. The city issued a formal apology acknowledging that Senator Thomas was unlawfully detained and that Officer McCall's conduct violated constitutional rights.
Comprehensive policy reforms. All officers required to complete 16 weeks of field training with no exceptions. Quarterly bias recognition training with scenario-based testing. Early warning system tracking stop patterns and racial disparities. Civilian Oversight Board with authority to review stops and recommend discipline. Public disclosure of stop data by race and outcome. Officer McCall issued a brief statement through his attorney. I never intended harm. I made mistakes in judgment that I deeply regret. Senator Thomas responded at a press conference. Intent doesn't erase impact. Officer McCall may not have intended to profile me, but that's exactly what happened. And it happened because the system that trained him, supervised him, and cleared him for duty failed to address obvious problems. This settlement isn't just about me. It's about every person who gets stopped, questioned, detained, and humiliated for existing while black. Do you think monetary settlements actually change police behavior, or are deeper reforms needed? 18 months after the incident, Senator Thomas was re-elected with 67% of the vote. He'd used the experience as a platform for criminal justice reform, introducing legislation requiring statewide tracking of police stops by race, mandating bias training for all officers, and creating a database of terminated officers to prevent problematic officers from simply moving to different departments. Officer Darren McCall left law enforcement at age 27. The misconduct registry made it impossible to get hired by another department. He found work in private security, but was terminated within 6 months after his background became known to the company's clients. The parking lot stop, captured on multiple cameras and viewed millions of times, followed him everywhere. The Brookline Police Department implemented all required reforms. Stop data from the following year showed a 39% reduction in stops without clear reasonable suspicion, and a significant reduction in racial disparities. The early warning system identified 3 other officers with concerning stop patterns, leading to additional training and closer supervision. But the most lasting impact was the conversation the incident sparked. Senator Thomas's case became a reference point in discussions about racial profiling, implicit bias, and the need for accountability in policing. The body cam footage was used in police training sessions across the country as an example of how not to conduct a stop. 2 years later, Senator Thomas still shops at that same grocery store. He parks in the same lot, walks the same path to the entrance. But he's always aware now, always watching for patrol cars, always carrying the memory of being handcuffed for walking while black. The settlement brought accountability. The reforms brought change. But nothing can restore the fundamental sense of safety that was violated that Thursday afternoon when an officer decided that his presence in a parking lot was suspicious enough to justify detention. If you believe these stories matter, if you think officers who profile should lose their badges, hit that subscribe button. We're exposing how bias operates in routine encounters and demanding accountability for officers who target people based on appearance rather than evidence. We're fighting for a system where walking to a grocery store doesn't require proving you're not a criminal. This isn't about one officer or one senator. It's about every person who's been stopped without cause and forced to defend their right to exist in public spaces.
Afternoon, sir. What exactly are you doing here?
Getting gas. What's the problem?
We got a call about suspicious activity. Let me see your ID.
Absolutely not. There's no reason to.
Sir, you will be detained if you fail to comply.
Attorney General Jordan A. Whitmore, you just turned a simple gas stop into a lawsuit.
The officer at the center of this case was Patrolman Eric Dalton, a 14-month rookie whose file looked clean only because nobody had taken the time to read between the lines. His academy instructors remembered him as eager but impulsive, the kind of recruit who mistook suspicion for evidence and confidence for competence. During field training, his supervising sergeant noted that Dalton had a habit of treating routine calls like imminent threats, a behavior that earned him 2 internal warnings but no real consequences. And on April 18, 2023, those unchecked habits aligned with a single misguided phone call. A clerk at Sunburst Fuel Station reported a man loitering near Pump 4 who looked like he didn't belong there. No crime, no disturbance, just appearance, mistaken for threat. Dalton arrived with his nerves dialed higher than the situation deserved and walked straight into a confrontation that would destroy his career, cost the city $5 million, and expose how fast bias can turn a peaceful moment into a civil rights disaster. Because the man he stopped wasn't the suspect, a trespasser, or a threat. He was Attorney General Jordan A. Whitmore, and the rookie officer's life was about to change the second Whitmore reached into his jacket and revealed the badge that outranked everyone on scene. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light.
Sunburst Fuel Station sat on the east side of the city, a standard commercial stop with 6 pumps painted in bright red and blue, a convenience store with large windows, and security cameras covering every angle of the forecourt. Mid-afternoon traffic was light, a few cars scattered across the pumps. Normal people doing normal things on a normal Tuesday. Jordan Whitmore, 49 years old, pulled his black sedan up to Pump 4 at 2:41 p.m. He was the state's Attorney General, the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the state, responsible for prosecuting major crimes, overseeing civil rights enforcement, and supervising police misconduct investigations. He'd held the position for 4 years, re-elected once, his face familiar to anyone who watched the news or followed state politics. He was dressed professionally, navy sport coat, white button-down shirt, gray slacks. His briefcase sat in the passenger seat. He just finished a meeting downtown and needed fuel before his next appointment. He stepped out of his car, inserted his credit card into the pump, selected regular unleaded, and began filling his tank. A completely unremarkable moment. Inside the convenience store, clerk Danny Martinez watched through the window. He'd been working at Sunburst for 8 months, a college student picking up shifts to cover tuition. He saw a black man at pump 4, well-dressed, calm, not causing any problems. But Martinez had grown up absorbing the same cultural messages about who looks suspicious and who doesn't. A black man standing at a gas pump, even one dressed in business attire, registered as something worth watching. Martinez picked up the store phone and called 911. "Yeah, there's a guy at pump 4 who's been here a while. He's just kind of looking around. I don't know, it feels off. He's a tall black man, maybe 40s or 50s, wearing a jacket. He looks like he doesn't belong here." The dispatcher logged the call as suspicious person at Sunburst Fuel Station, pump 4. The description was transmitted to patrol units in the area. No crime mentioned, no specific behavior described, just appearance and a clerk's feeling. Officer Eric Dalton was 2 blocks away when the call came through. At 27 years old, with 14 months on the force, Dalton still operated with the mindset that every call was potentially dangerous, that suspicion was the same as evidence, that his instincts were always right. He responded immediately, driving faster than necessary for a vague, suspicious person call. His Axon Bodycam activated as he pulled into the gas station at 2:44 p.m., 3 minutes after Martinez's call. The footage captured everything from his perspective: the quick exit from the patrol car, the purposeful stride across the forecourt, the target already identified, pump 4, black man in a sport coat, calmly replacing the fuel nozzle. Dalton approached from behind, his hand resting on his duty belt, his posture aggressive for a situation that showed no signs of danger. "Afternoon, sir. What exactly are you doing here?" Whitmore turned, his expression shifting from neutral to confused. The question made no sense. He was standing at a gas pump with the fuel nozzle in his hand. "Getting gas? What's the problem?" Dalton stepped closer, his eyes scanning Whitmore's clothing, his car, looking for justification. "We got a call about suspicious activity at this location. I need to see your identification." Whitmore's decades in law enforcement kicked in immediately. He recognized the pattern: vague justification, demand for ID, no articulable reasonable suspicion. Suspicious activity? I'm pumping gas. That's not suspicious.
"Sir, I'm going to need to see some ID. You don't have reasonable suspicion to demand my ID. What crime do you think I've committed?" Dalton's jaw tightened. He didn't like being questioned, didn't like having his authority challenged. "We received a report. You match the description. If you refuse to cooperate, you will be detained." Whitmore replaced the fuel cap on his car, his movements calm and deliberate. "Officer, I'm going to give you an opportunity to walk away from this. You've made an assumption based on a call that described no criminal activity. You have no legal basis to stop me, question me, or demand identification. I suggest you reconsider." But Dalton had already committed. His ego wouldn't allow retreat. "Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle." "Absolutely not." Dalton's hand moved toward his handcuffs. "Sir, if you fail to comply, you will be detained." Whitmore reached slowly into his inner jacket pocket, his movements visible and non-threatening. He pulled out a black leather credential case and flipped it open, holding it directly in Dalton's line of sight. Federal shield on the left side, identification card on the right. Attorney General Jordan A. Whitmore. "Attorney General Jordan A. Whitmore," he said, his voice steady and controlled. "You just turned a simple gas stop into a civil rights case." The Bodycam captured the exact moment Dalton's world collapsed. His eyes fixed on the credentials. His face went pale. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. 3 full seconds of silence while his brain processed the magnitude of his error. Then came the stammering. I was just, the call said nothing that gave you legal authority to stop me.
You saw a black man at a gas station and decided that was suspicious enough to warrant investigation. You're wrong, and you're on camera. Dalton took a step back, his confidence evaporating. Sir, I apologize. I was just following procedure. You weren't following procedure. You were following bias. Now step back and let me leave.
Dalton returned to his patrol car, shaking. He sat behind the wheel for 5 minutes before calling his supervisor. Sarge, I need to report an incident. I stopped someone at Sunburst Fuel Station and it turned out to be the Attorney General. Sergeant Paul Henderson arrived at the station within 12 minutes. He found Dalton sitting in his car, visibly distressed, and Whitmore standing beside his sedan, holding his phone with the Bodycam number written in his notes app. Henderson approached Whitmore first. Mr. Attorney General, I'm Sergeant Henderson. I apologize for any inconvenience. This wasn't an inconvenience, Sergeant. This was racial profiling. Your officer stopped me without cause, demanded identification without reasonable suspicion, and threatened detention for the crime of pumping gas while black. Henderson's expression shifted from apologetic to alarmed. Sir, I assure you we'll investigate this thoroughly. You'll do more than investigate. I'm filing a formal complaint with Internal Affairs. I want that body cam footage preserved, I want the dispatch recording of the initial call, and I want a full review of Officer Dalton's training records. Whitmore got into his car and drove away, leaving Henderson to deal with the officer who just profiled the state's top law enforcement official. Before we continue, do you think gas station clerks should be held accountable for false 911 calls based on bias? Drop your answer below. By 5 p.m. that same day, the footage was being reviewed by Captain Lisa Torres, head of Internal Affairs. The police chief stood behind her, along with the city attorney, all three watching in silence as the disaster played out frame by frame. Torres had seen countless misconduct cases, but this one was particularly damning. The body cam showed everything: Dalton approaching without legitimate cause, escalating without justification, demanding ID without reasonable suspicion, threatening detention despite no criminal activity.
She pulled Dalton's personnel file. The warnings were there, documented but not addressed. Officer Dalton tends to treat routine calls as high-risk situations without proper assessment. Noted difficulty distinguishing between unusual behavior and criminal activity. Recommendation: additional training on constitutional limitations before solo patrol. But like so many departments struggling with staffing, those recommendations had been acknowledged and ignored. Dalton had been cleared for solo patrol after minimal field training because the department needed bodies on the street more than it needed properly trained officers. Torres pulled a dispatch recording of the original call. Martinez's voice came through clearly. He's just kinda looking around. I don't know, it feels off. He's a tall black man. He looks like he doesn't belong here. No crime, no disturbance, no threat. Just appearance and discomfort, transmitted through a 911 call and acted upon by an officer trained to see black men as inherently suspicious. Torres interviewed Dalton the next morning. The conversation was recorded per policy. Officer Dalton, you stopped Attorney General Whitmore without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Explain your decision-making. Dalton's voice was defensive, desperate. Dispatch reported suspicious activity. I responded to investigate. The dispatch call described someone looking around at a gas station. That's not criminal activity. What specific, articulable facts gave you reasonable suspicion to initiate a stop? The caller said he looked like he didn't belong there. Looking like you don't belong is not a crime. It's not reasonable suspicion. It's bias. And you acted on it. I was following training. You weren't following training. You were following assumptions. When did you realize you'd made a mistake? When he showed me his credentials. And even then, according to the Bodycam audio, you tried to justify the stop rather than immediately apologizing and disengaging. Why? Silence. Because there was no good answer. Dalton had seen a black man, assumed criminality, and refused to acknowledge error even when confronted with proof of his mistake. Torres recommended immediate termination. The chief agreed.
Jordan Whitmore filed a comprehensive federal civil rights lawsuit 6 weeks after the incident. The complaint was methodical, detailed, and devastating. Count 1, Fourth Amendment violation. Unlawful stop and detention without reasonable suspicion or probable cause. Count 2, 14th Amendment violation. Racial profiling and discriminatory enforcement based solely on race. Count 3, abuse of authority. Officer exceeded lawful authority by threatening arrest for refusing to comply with unlawful orders. Count 4, emotional distress. Humiliation and violation of being treated as criminal while engaged in routine activity. Count 5, municipal liability. Department's failure to adequately train and supervise officers. Failure to address documented concerns about Dalton's judgment. The lawsuit sought $5 million in damages, termination of Officer Dalton, and comprehensive policy reforms. The city's attorneys reviewed the case and advised immediate settlement. The evidence was overwhelming. Body cam footage, dispatch recordings, Dalton's training file showing ignored warnings. The complete lack of reasonable suspicion. Fighting the case would only generate more publicity and potentially result in a larger jury award. Settlement negotiations concluded within 4 months. The agreement included $5 million payment to Jordan Whitmore, $3 million compensatory damages, $2 million punitive damages. Officer Eric Dalton terminated immediately. POSC certification permanently revoked. Name entered into National Decertification Index, barred from future law enforcement employment. Comprehensive policy reforms. 911 call screening for bias-based complaints. Extended field training to 20 weeks minimum. Mandatory quarterly bias recognition training. Early warning system for officers showing patterns of discriminatory stops. Civilian oversight board with subpoena authority. Public acknowledgement. The police chief and mayor issued formal apologies, and the settlement agreement included explicit acknowledgement that Dalton's conduct violated constitutional rights.
Whitmore held a brief press conference after the settlement was finalized. He stood at a podium, the same professional demeanor he maintained throughout, and addressed the cameras. This settlement represents accountability. But let's be clear about what happened. I was stopped for pumping gas while black. No crime, no threat, just a clerk's discomfort and an officer's bias. The difference between me and countless others who experience this daily is that I knew my rights. I had resources, and I had a platform. Most people don't. They comply out of fear. They accept the violation because fighting back seems impossible. He paused, his voice taking on weight. Officer Dalton's career is over. That's consequence. The city paid $5 million. That's accountability. But the real question is whether anything changes, whether departments stop clearing undertrained officers for solo patrol, whether 911 dispatchers screen calls for actual criminal activity instead of transmitting bias, whether officers learn to distinguish between their discomfort with black presence and actual reasonable suspicion. 6 months after the settlement, Whitmore drove past some burst fuel station. A different officer was on patrol nearby, this one stopping to help a motorist with a flat tire.
calm, professional, helpful. The kind of policing that builds trust rather than destroying it.
Eric Dalton left law enforcement at age 28, his career destroyed by 4 minutes of bias-driven judgment. The Bodycam footage from that April afternoon became required viewing in police academies across the state, a cautionary tale of how assumptions collapse into constitutional violations. The gas station clerk, Danny Martinez, quit his job 2 weeks after learning his call had led to the incident. He issued a public apology. "I called 911 because someone looked different, not because they did anything wrong. I let my own biases turn a normal moment into a nightmare. That's on me." The real cost of that afternoon isn't measured in settlement dollars or terminated careers. It's measured in the daily reality that a black man, even one who's the state's attorney general, can be treated as suspicious for pumping gas. That credentials don't prevent profiling. That bias operates beneath conscious thought, turning ordinary moments into confrontations. Jordan Whitmore continues his work as Attorney General, prosecuting cases and overseeing civil rights enforcement. But he carries the memory of standing at Pump 4, watching a rookie officer approach with assumptions instead of evidence, knowing exactly how the encounter would unfold because he'd seen it happen to others countless times before. If you believe these stories matter, if you think officers should be fired for profiling, hit that subscribe button. We're exposing how undertrained rookies with unchecked biases destroy lives and cost cities millions. We're demanding accountability. We're fighting for a system where pumping gas doesn't require proving you belong. This isn't about one officer or one attorney general.